"He's never coming back," she said, her voice a strange mix of feigned sadness and sharp, undisguised relief. "It's for the best, Mark. He'll be comfortable. We can finally live." I heard it through the slightly ajar window of the taxi that had just dropped me at the foot of my own driveway, 100 yards from the house I built with my own hands. My daughter, Clara, my only child, was on the porch, her back to me, phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to her husband. I had come home 3 months early from the convalescent center she'd so tearfully insisted I needed after my heart scare. They had told me I was a miracle, that the fresh mountain air and rigorous physical therapy had rolled back the clock a decade. I felt stronger than I had since my darling Eleanor passed. But in that single, brutal moment, standing there with my old leather duffel bag in hand, the strength in my legs turned to ice. She wasn't just talking about me being gone for a long weekend. She was talking about me being gone forever. And in the chilling silence that followed her words, a cold, hard certainty settled in my soul where the warmth of a homecoming should have been. I would not be weak. I would not be the doddering old fool she believed me to be. I would make her regret those words, regret this betrayal, with every fiber of her being. I would teach her the true meaning of the home she was so eager to discard. I slipped back into the taxi before she could turn around, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. "Take me to the Millersville Inn," I told the driver, my voice raspy. He nodded, not asking questions. The inn was a quiet place on the edge of town, a place where a man could think. And I had a lifetime of thinking to do, a lifetime of love and labor to reevaluate under the harsh, unforgiving light of my daughter's greed. The farm wasn't just land. It was a living testament to my life with Eleanor. We bought the first 100 acres with wedding money and a prayer. I remember the day we signed the papers, her hand trembling in mine, her eyes shining with a mixture of terror and fierce hope. "It's ours, Arthur," she had whispered, her breath fogging in the crisp autumn air. "All of it. Our future for 45 years. That future was built with my sweat and her grace. Every fence post I hammered into the soil was a promise to her. Every furrow I plowed was a line in our love story. We raised Clara there, in the heart of it all. I taught her how to read the clouds, how to feel the coming rain in her bones. I held her tiny hand and showed her how to press a seed into the earth, explaining that she was holding a promise of life. She would laugh, her pigtails bouncing, as she chased butterflies through the alfalfa fields that shimmered like a green sea in the summer sun. Eleanor would watch from the porch swing, a pitcher of lemonade sweating beside her, her smile the only sunshine I ever truly needed. The farm was her sanctuary, and after she was taken from me by the cancer, it became my memorial to her. Her favorite roses still climbed the trellis by the front door, their scent a ghostly reminder of her presence. Her vegetable garden, which I tended with a devotion bordering on worship, still produced the juiciest tomatoes in the county. Every sunrise that painted the sky in hues of orange and pink over my eastern fields was a conversation with her memory. Clara had been different after her mother's death. A light in her had dimmed. The farm, once her playground, became a cage. She went off to a city college and came back with a business degree and a fiancé named Mark. Mark was all polished shoes and easy smiles that never quite reached his eyes. He looked at my calloused hands with a kind of polite pity. He called my fields assets and my life's work undeveloped property. He spoke of global markets and investment portfolios, words that felt alien and sterile in the warm, earthy air of my home. "Dad, you're sitting on a gold mine," he'd say, gesturing vaguely at the horizon. "This land is worth a fortune to the right developer." Clara would nod along, her eyes filled with a restless hunger I didn't recognize. "Mark's right, Dad," she'd chime in. "You could sell, travel, enjoy your retirement. You've worked hard enough." They didn't understand. The work wasn't a means to an end. It was the end itself. The call of the rooster at dawn, the smell of turned earth, the satisfaction of a full silo before the first snow. That was my retirement. That was my joy. But they saw only dirt and dollar signs. Then came the heart scare. It was real enough, a sharp, terrifying pain that sent me to my knees in the middle of the barn. Clara and Mark were there in an instant, their faces masks of concern. They fussed over me, drove me to the hospital, and listened with grave expressions as the doctor prescribed rest and a stress-free environment. It was Clara who found the perfect place, a beautiful facility in the next state over, renowned for its cardiac rehabilitation program. "It's the best, Dad," she'd said, her eyes welling with tears. "We just want you to get better. Don't worry about a thing at home. We'll take care of everything." I was weak, frightened, and I saw the daughter I had raised, the little girl who used to bring me water in the fields, and I believed her. I signed the papers she put in front of me, giving her power of attorney to manage my affairs. Just while you're getting your strength back, I saw it as an act of love. I now understood it was the first turn of the key in my own prison. Checking into the Millersville and under a false name felt like something out of a spy movie, but my mind was anything but playful. It was a cold, efficient machine. My first call was to John Sterling, my lawyer and a friend since we were boys. John was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had handled my affairs for 30 years. "Arthur, I thought you were in recovery. What's going on?" His voice was laced with genuine concern. I told him everything. The phone call I overheard. Clara's words. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When John finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. "The vultures," he growled. "Arthur, you stay put. Don't let them know you're back. I'm going to start digging. She can't just sell the farm. Not all of it. Not without jumping through some serious hoops." Hope, cold and sharp, pierced through my despair. Hoops. Of course. Years ago, after Eleanor passed, John and I had sat down and structured my will and estate. My memory was fuzzy from the hospital stay, but I trusted John implicitly. He had always looked out for me. While he began his work, I began my own. I started taking walks around town, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. I looked different. I had lost 20 pounds, and my skin was tanned from the hours of outdoor therapy. No one recognized the supposedly frail old man. I sat in the corner of the town diner, the one with the worn-out linoleum and the best coffee, and I listened. The town was buzzing. The old Vance farm had been sold. Sold for a song, some said, to a big corporation, Sterling Development Group. They were planning a massive luxury housing community with a golf course. Whispers turned to Mark, Clara's husband. He'd been seen around town, flashing cash, buying rounds of drinks, bragging about the deal of a lifetime he and his wife had closed. He told people they were finally free, about to embark on a year-long trip around the world. First-class tickets, 5-star hotels. The whole works. My coffee went cold in my cup. He was celebrating the death of my world, the erasure of my Eleanor's memory, with champagne and bragging. The anger in my chest burned clean and hot, leaving no room for sorrow. A few days later, John called me to his office. The room was lined with leather-bound books that smelled of dust and justice. He had a stack of documents on his desk. His face was grim. "It's worse than we thought, Arthur. And also, much, much better," he explained. Clara had used the power of attorney to sell the farm. She had gotten 2 independent appraisals, both suspiciously low, and sold it to Sterling Development Group for just under $2 million. A pittance for 500 acres of prime land, but a fortune to her and Mark. "Sterling Development," John said, tapping a file. "The CEO is Marcus Sterling's uncle. This wasn't just a sale. It was a sweetheart deal designed to defraud you of the land's true value. It's collusion, plain and simple." My heart sank. It was gone, but John held up a hand, a grim smile playing on his lips. "But here's what your brilliant, greedy daughter and her snake of a husband didn't know. 15 years ago, you and I created something called the Eleanor Vance Heritage Trust." The memory came flooding back. It was after a developer had tried to buy out our neighbor, promising a strip mall. Eleanor had been horrified at the thought of the beautiful countryside being paved over. "This land is a living thing, Arthur," she had said. "We're just its caretakers to honor that wish." John and I had placed the original 300 acres, the heart of the farm, including the house, the barn, and the pastures bordering the river, into an irrevocable trust. The purpose of the trust was explicit: to preserve the land for agricultural use for future generations of our family, or, failing that, to be donated to a state conservation program. Clara was named a trustee alongside me, but the trust documents were clear. The land could not be sold for development. Ever. She had only been able to sell the 200 acres I had acquired later in life, the outer fields. She had sold the shell, but the heart of the farm, legally, was still mine. Still Eleanor's. She committed felony fraud. Arthur, John stated, his voice flat. She provided the title company with incomplete trust documents, misrepresenting her authority. The moment Sterling's bulldozers try to touch that main property, they'll be in breach of a federal conservation trust. But there was more. John slid another folder across the desk. It was a geological survey report from a decade ago. I had commissioned it on a whim when an oil company was sniffing around the county. Do you remember this? John asked. I vaguely recalled it. The report had been unremarkable, showing no signs of oil or natural gas. I had filed it away and forgotten about it. John pointed to a paragraph on the last page, a section on mineralogical composition. You and I read this looking for oil, Arthur. We weren't looking for anything else. But I had a friend at the state university take another look. Your land, specifically the land in the trust along the riverbed, is sitting on one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals in the state. Lithium, cobalt, neodymium. The stuff they use for batteries, for phones, for everything. The minerals alone, if properly extracted, are worth, well, the number has a lot of zeros. He paused, letting it sink in. And when we set up the trust to protect the land from mining operations, we explicitly separated the mineral rights from the land title. The trust owns the land, but you, Arthur Vance, personally and solely, own the rights to everything underneath it. I stared at him, my mind reeling. The farm I had refused to sell for a few million was sitting on a fortune that could be worth 100 times that. And Clara, in her haste and her greed, had known nothing about it. She had sold the dirt for pennies, completely oblivious to the diamonds buried within. The irony was so bitter, so perfect, it was almost poetic. She and Mark thought they had stolen my future to fund their vacation. In reality, they had thrown away a generational legacy for a handful of trinkets. The plan began to form in my mind, not as a vague desire for revenge, but as a series of clear, precise, and devastating steps. It was time to go home. I had John send a certified letter to Sterling Development Group. It was a simple, polite letter, informing them that their recent purchase of the Vance property was under legal review due to fraudulent misrepresentation by the seller. It also included a copy of the Eleanor Vance Heritage Trust Charter and the Geological Survey detailing the vast, untapped mineral wealth to which they had absolutely no claim. We gave them 48 hours to halt all preparatory work and contact our office. The predictable explosion was not long in coming. John told me the call from Sterling's lawyers was apoplectic. They had been sold a bill of goods. Their multi-million-dollar golf course development was now a legal minefield, and the real prize, the mineral rights, was completely out of their reach. They had been played for fools by a slick-talking nephew and his naive wife. Their next call, I knew, would be to Mark and Clara. The trap was set. I decided the confrontation needed to happen in the house. In her mother's house. I drove up the long gravel driveway, the crunch of the tires a familiar, comforting sound. The old oak tree, the one I'd planted as a sapling on the day Clara was born, stood sentinel, its leaves just beginning to turn the colors of autumn. But the house itself felt wrong. There was a large, garish sold sign hammered into the front lawn, a wound in the green grass. Boxes were piled on the porch, labeled in Clara's neat handwriting. Kitchen, books, photos, my life, being dismantled and packed away like old holiday decorations. I used the key I always kept hidden under the loose stone by the back steps and let myself in. The air was stale, filled with the scent of cardboard and finality. Dust motes danced in the afternoon, sunbeams slanting across the floor. They had already taken down Eleanor's paintings from the walls, leaving pale, ghostly rectangles in their place. My favorite armchair was covered in a plastic sheet, looking like a patient on an operating table. I sat in the kitchen, at the old wooden table where we had shared thousands of meals, and I waited. It didn't take long. A little after 5, Mark's shiny black sedan came roaring up the drive. They got out, laughing about something. They looked happy, carefree. They were dressed in new, expensive clothes. Clara was wearing a silk blouse the color of money, and Mark had on a watch that cost more than my first tractor. They walked in without even looking, their arms full of more empty boxes. "I'll start on the office," Mark said. "If we can get this all cleared out by Friday, the movers can just take it all to storage." "Sounds good," Clara replied, and then she saw me. She froze, a box of packing tape slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor. Her face, which had been glowing with excitement, instantly drained of all color. She looked like she had seen a ghost. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mark turned, his own smug smile vanishing as he saw me. He paled, his eyes wide with disbelief and something else, fear. "Arthur," he stammered, "what were you doing here? You're supposed to be where?" I asked, my voice calm and even. I didn't stand up. I made them look down at me. "Comfortable? Out of the way. Never coming back." Clara flinched as I threw her own words back at her. "We were just coming to visit you next week," she lied, her eyes darting around the room, anywhere but at me. "We were going to surprise you." "You've already surprised me enough, Clara," I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. "I came home a few days ago. I wanted to see my house." Imagine my surprise when I found this. I gestured to this sold sign on the lawn. "It seems you've been busy." Mark found his voice first, a blustering, false bravado. "Look, Arthur, we can explain. With your health, we thought it was for the best. The farm was too much for you to handle. We got a great price, set you up for life. You never have to worry about money again." "My money?" I chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You mean the money you were planning to see the world with? The first-class tickets? The five-star hotels?" Mark's jaw tightened. He knew I knew. Clara just stared, her mouth slightly open, the full weight of the situation beginning to dawn on her. "How could you, Clara?" I asked, my voice finally cracking with the pain I had held at bay. "This house, your mother's house, did her memory mean so little to you? Did I mean so little?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. "You don't understand," she burst out, her voice rising. "You were always content to just stay here, buried in this dirt. I wanted more. Mark and we want to live to see things. You were happy with your life. Why can't you let me be happy with mine?" "It's just land, Dad. It's just stuff. Just stuff," I repeated, the words like poison on my tongue. "Your mother's roses by the door, are they just stuff? The notch on the kitchen door frame where we mark your height every year, is that just stuff? This table built from the wood of the old barn that blew down in the '88 storm, is that just stuff?" Every word was a hammer blow, and I could see her crumbling. I stood up slowly, picking up a thick manila folder I had placed on the chair beside me. I slid it onto the table. "You were right about one thing. You wanted more, and you were sitting on so much more than you could ever imagine. You just weren't smart enough to see it." I opened the folder. "This is the charter for the Eleanor Vance Heritage Trust. It means that this house, this barn, and the 300 acres your mother loved most were never yours to sell. In trying to do so, you've committed several felonies, including title fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." Claire's face went from pale to ghostly white. She looked at Mark, who was staring at the papers as if they were a coiled snake. "But that's just your legal problem," I continued, my voice dropping. "Your financial problem is much, much bigger." I slid the geological survey across the table. "You sold the outer field for a steal to Mark's uncle. A crooked deal, but a deal nonetheless. But in your rush to cash in my legacy for a vacation, you missed the real treasure. You sold the dirt, Clara. You left the gold." I tapped the report. "Rare earth minerals. Enough to fund your world travels 1,000 times over. And the mineral rights? They were never part of the land title. They belonged to me, personally." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock Eleanor's father had given us as a wedding gift. Clara sank into a chair, her entire body trembling. Mark was sweating, his polished veneer completely gone, revealing the cheap, terrified man underneath. Just then, His phone buzzed violently on the counter. He snatched it up. The caller ID must have read Uncle. His hand was shaking as he answered. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the blood drain from his face. He listened for a moment, then stammered. "It's not my fault. She said it was clean. I didn't know." He hung up, looking at Clara with pure, unadulterated venom. "They're suing us," he hissed. "They want the money back. All of it. They're saying we defrauded them." "Well, you did," I said calmly. Clara finally looked at me, her face a mess of tears and dawning horror. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the trip. It was the crushing, irreversible finality of what she had done. She had traded a kingdom for a handful of magic beans, and now even the beans were being taken away. She had betrayed her father, dishonored her mother's memory, and destroyed her own future, all for nothing. The weight of it seemed to physically crush her. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed, the words empty and useless. "I didn't know. I never thought." "No," I said, my voice devoid of pity. "You didn't think. You just wanted. And now you have exactly what you deserve." "Nothing." I turned and walked out of the house, leaving them in the ruins of their greed, the silence of the home they had tried to kill ringing in their ears. The air outside felt cleaner, fresher. I walked over to the sold sign and, with a deep satisfaction, tore it from the ground and snapped the wooden post over my knee. The aftermath was as messy and pathetic as I had anticipated. Sterling Development sued Clara and Mark for the return of the $2 million plus damages. They had already spent nearly a quarter of it on non-refundable travel packages, new cars, and designer clothes. They were forced to declare bankruptcy. The scandal was the talk of the town, and they were pariahs. Mark, showing his true colors, divorced Clara, blaming her for everything in a bitter, public legal battle. He left town with nothing but his sedan and a mountain of debt. Clara was left alone, broken and disgraced. She had to sell her condo in the city and move into a small, rented apartment above a laundromat. She tried to call me a few times, leaving tearful, rambling voicemails. I never answered. There was nothing left to say. As for the farm, it was returned to its rightful state. The trust was reaffirmed, and the fraudulent sale was voided. I had no intention of mining those minerals. That would have been a betrayal of Eleanor's memory, just as profound as Clara's. But the knowledge of their existence gave me a new kind of power. I used the Geological Survey as leverage, working with the state to establish the entire 500 acres as a permanent agricultural and nature preserve in Eleanor's name. The Eleanor Vance Conservancy would protect the land from developers forever, ensuring that the fields would always be fields and the river would always run clean. The state, eager to protect such a valuable and ecologically important piece of land, provided grants to help restore and maintain the property. I hired a young, eager family to manage the day-to-day farming of the outer fields, their children's laughter now echoing where there had been only a grim silence. I didn't do it for revenge. Not really. The revenge was simply the consequence of their own actions. I did it for Eleanor. I did it for the little girl who used to chase butterflies in the alfalfa, a memory of a daughter I had loved and lost long before she ever sold my land. Some nights I sit on the porch swing, just as Eleanor used to, and watch the sunset paint the sky. I feel the cool breeze whisper through the leaves of the old oak tree. I am home. I am at peace. I have learned the hardest lesson a parent can learn, that you can give your children everything you have, but you cannot give them your heart or your values. Clara saw a prison of dirt and obligation. She failed to see what was in front of her all along, a legacy of love, a foundation of security, a kingdom of her own. She traded it all for a fleeting dream, and in the end, woke up to a nightmare of her own making. The land remains patient and forgiving. It will be here long after I am gone, a silent testament to a love that was stronger than greed, and a home that could never truly be sold.